We continue now at the top of Daf Yomi Gemara and Meseches Shevuos. This is Shevuos Daf 5a. On the previous summit, the Gemara said that when Rebbe says in the Mishnah that there are 4 cases of violation of Shevuos where the person has to bring a carbon, encompassing cases that are in future tense and cases that are in past tense as well. So Rebbe was following the opinion of Rebbe Akiva. And the Gemara said in the previous summit, it wasn't just that he was following Rebbe Akiva in the Mishnah, but he himself doesn't hold like Rebbe Akiva. He himself actually does hold like Rebbe Akiva. And the reason is because this is learned out from the method of Darush that's called Riboy Umiyat. Rebbe darshans through Ribuye and Miyute and not through Klal Uprat. And the Gemara asked on the previous summit that that's not true. We find by Eved Ivri that Rebbe actually does use Klal Uprat, as the Gemara now continues, Ribuye Umiyute, that it's Rebbe Yossi Rebbe Yehuda who follows Riboy and Miyut. And again, it's Rebbe who follows Klal Uprat, and so therefore that's exactly the opposite of what we said in the previous summit. And the Gemara continues and says, in yes, Bialma Klali Uprate Darish. Actually, we have to go back on what we said before. Really, Rebbe, he follows the method of Klal Uprat, as we find here by Eved Ivri. The question then is, what about what we found when it came to Pidyon Haben? There it seemed that he was going with Riboy and Miyut. V'hacha hainu taim, and over here by Pidyon Haben, the reason over here, as the Rashi explains, V'hacha gabe Pidyon Haben lahachi darish le beribuye umeyute. The reason by Pidyon Haben specifically why Rebbe does do Riboy and Miyut, mishum de'ein haprat bein shnei klolos, as we're about to see, it's because the prat is not actually within the psukim, it's not between the two klolos. If it's not between the two generalizations, then he actually will darshan a Riboy Miyut. Again, as the Gemara says, V'hachainu taima kedetana devei Rabbi Shmuel. Here, the reason why Rebbe goes with Riboy and Miyut is like it was taught in the yeshiva of Rabbi Shmuel. Tetana devei Rabbi Shmuel, it was taught in the yeshiva of Rabbi Shmuel. B'mayim shnei pamim, it says b'mayim 2 times. This is talking about what kinds of fish are kosher. Pasuk says, "As zet tochlu mikol asher b'moyim, kol asher lo snapir v'kaskeses b'mayim, b'yamim uvanecholim osam tochelu." It's referring to the fact again that they have fins and scales. It says b'mayim. It says that 2 times, and then it says b'yamim uvanecholim. So again, it says b'mayim shnei pa'amim ein ze klal uprat. Tanda Rabbi Shmuel says that this is not considered to be a klal uprat, elo ribo umiyut. Rather, it's considered to be a riboy and miyut. And again, the reason is because the prat over here is not between the 2 klolos. Rashi explains, "Kedetana devei Rabbi Shmuel be'elu treifas." This is in Chulin and Elu treifas. De'iko tana dedorish as zet tochlu mikol asher b'moyim klal. There is a tana that says that mikol asher b'moyim is a generalization. B'yamim uvenecholim a prat, and then when it says in the seas and in the streams, that's a specific. And b'mayim chazru klal, then it says b'mayim, that's another klal. Upal legolei tana devei Rabbi Shmuel, and on that tana, the tana devei Rabbi Shmuel argues. V'yomer, and the tana devei Rabbi Shmuel says b'mayim smuchen zelazeh. The 2 words b'mayim are near each other. Only after that it says bayamim uvanecholim. Hilkach ein ze klal uprat. Therefore, this is not considered a klal uprat. El hatileyu beineim ledarsho beribuye umeyute. Rather, the way you have to darshan it is as a riboy and miyut in that situation. And the Gemara continues v'rabbanan, and the v'rabbanan. And when it comes to the rabbanan, Rashi says v'rabbanan depligio la de Rebbe. The rabbanan who argue on Rebbe v'darshi le b'klal uprat. They say we can darshan in a klal uprat fashion there. Svir l'hu keda'amri b'ma'arava. They hold like they say in the West, as the Gemara continues. Amar Ravina keda'amri b'ma'arava. Ravina says it's like they say in the West. Kol makom shatamotzi shtei klolos hasmuchos elazeh. Anytime you find 2 generalizations near each other, hatil prat beineim, you are able to put the specific between them. V'donam b'klal uprat, and you can learn it. You can darshan it as a klal uprat. And the Gemara now continues and says, okay, so we're back to our question. Hashda diamid Rebbe klali uprat darish. Well, now that we're saying that Rebbe darshans the method generally of klal uprat and not the method of riboy and miyut, bal karcha kasha Shevuos. So now we're back to our question. We have to say that Shevuos is difficult because, again, Rebbe might have been following Rebbe Akiva, but Rebbe Akiva was using riboy and miyut. And again, in general, Rebbe doesn't use riboy and miyut. And so the Gemara says, you're right. Ela b'Shevuos nosev alev with Rebbe Akiva. You'll have to say that in our Mishnah, when it came to the case of Shavuos, he's going according to Rebbe Akiva in terms of putting it in the Mishnah. However, V'lei lo svirle. However, Rebbe himself personally did not hold like Rebbe Akiva in this regard. And the Gemara continues, Gufa, returning to what we said above, Minayin she'eno chayev ela al sheyesh bo yediyah betchila v'yediyah besof v'helim beintayim. From where do we know that a person is only chayev when it comes again to a situation of yediyah satuma? He has to have had knowledge originally and knowledge at the end, but there was a lapse of awareness in the interim. How do we know that? Talmud lomar, it's because the pasuk says v'nelam shnei pam. It says the word v'nelam 2 times. Divrei Rabbi Akiva. These are the words of Rabbi Akiva. Rebbe Omer, Rebbe says eino tzarach. You don't even need that it says v'nelam twice. Harehu Omer v'nelam, when it says the word v'nelam once, mechlal sheyada, that implies that he had some knowledge before. V'hu yada, and then it says he knows. Harei kan shtei yediyos, that's 2 times where he had knowledge. Imkein matam alomer v'nelam, and if so, why does it say the second v'nelam? Now we already know there were 2 times where he had yediyah. That's yediyah in the beginning, yediyah at the end, and a lapse of awareness in the middle. So therefore, why do we need v'nelam at all? That's l'chayiv al helam tumah v'al helam mikdash. That's to say that the person is chayiv not only in a situation where there was a lapse of awareness with regards to the tumah, but a person is also going to be chayiv to bring a carbon where there's a lapse of awareness with regards to the fact that this was kodesh that he ate, or that this was the Beis HaMikdash. Again, that's Rebbe saying in this brais over here that in 4 different scenarios, when it comes to Yediyas HaTumah, a person can be liable to bring a carbon. And the Gemara says, Amar Mar, the master said, V'nelam, again it says V'nelam mechlal sheyada. So Rebbe said that when it says the word V'nelam, that already implies that he had a Yediyah b'tchila. The Gemara says, my mashma, well, from where do we know from the language of V'nelam? Maybe V'nelam means that he never knew, he never had an awareness. How do you know that it's a lapse of awareness from something that he knew originally? Amar Rava says, Mideloch se v'hi aluma mimenu, because it doesn't say v'hi aluma mimenu. V'hi aluma mimenu would mean that it was something that he was unaware of the entire time. It doesn't say that. From the fact that it says V'nelam, it sounds like something where he did have an awareness, and then there was a lapse of that awareness. Amar le Abaye said to him, he said to Rava, Elameata, but according to that, Gabe Sota dichsev, by Sota, it's written a similar language. It says V'nelam me'eina isha. It says that the husband is not aware of the fact that she committed this adultery. Mechlal dehaviyada meikar. Now, if you're going to learn the pasuk the same way that we just learned V'nelam over here by Yediyas HaTumah, so that would imply that the husband did know originally, there was some original knowledge of the fact that she had committed adultery. But if he had some knowledge and he continued to remain married to her, so mi badku lamaya, would the water examine her properly? In such a case, the water wouldn't work in the situation of Sota if the husband had knowledge then continued to stay with his wife. V'atanya, because we learned in a brayso v'niko ha'ish me'avon v'isha ahi tiso es avon, it says the husband is going to be innocent from sin and the woman is going to carry the burden of the sin. And we understand that to mean as follows: Bizman shoish menuka me'avon, only when the husband is innocent of sin, then hamayim bod kinesishto, then the waters can examine his wife. But eino ish menuka me'avon, but if the husband is not clean from sin, ein hamayim bod kinesishto, so then the water does not examine his wife. And so therefore clearly when it says v'nela me'ena isha, when it comes to Sota, it means it was concealed from him the entire time. And the Gemara continues and asks Vasu, and further, Gabe Torah, in reference to Torah, this is from a pasuk in Eov, it's written Dichsiv, it's written v'nelma me'ene kol chai, it says it was concealed from all living creatures, me'of hashamayim, and from the birds of the sky. Nistra, again, it was hidden from them as well. Mechlal de'ika dehaviyada be, again, you're going to have to say that the inference is that there was some knowledge of it, but that's not true. V'achsib, but it's written again also in Sefer Eov. In Sefer Eov, it says lo yoda enosh erka, it says nobody knew about the value of the Torah, and so therefore clearly again v'nelma means it was concealed all the time. It was eternally, so to speak, concealed. And so therefore Elamar Abaye, rather Abaye says we have to have a new understanding of what Rebbe was saying when he says that v'nelam implies that there was some kind of yediyah, and the answer is kasava Rebbe. It's because Rebbe actually holds yediyas beis rabo shmo yedi, even knowing the knowledge that you would have gotten learned in school, that's considered to be knowledge. Rashi explains, Yediyas beis rabo shalomad bebeis rabo, it simply means as follows: when a person learned in the house of his Rebbe, when he learned at school, shahanogea betuma tameh, he learned this halacha: if you touch something tameh, you become tameh. V'hu yada shirgesh kishanaga, he knew, he felt when he touched it. Avalo hizbonin lasum al libo shenitma, it's just that he didn't pay attention enough to realize that he was tameh. So shma yediyah, that's called yediyah. So in other words, what Rebbe is really saying is that essentially in 90% of cases there's going to be yediyah, because automatically you knew that you touched something. And every person who learned in school, every person who learned in yeshiva knows that that creates tum. And so therefore, there's an assumption over here that there's a yediyah betchila. That's actually all that Rebbe means to say when he says there was a yediyas beis rabo shema yediyah. But the Gemara says, 1 second, how could you say that? Amar le Rav Papa li Abaya. Rav Papa said to Abaya, ela de katani. But then if that's the case, that which it says, ein bo yediyah betchila, that in a case where there is no knowledge in the beginning, v'yesh bo yediyah basof, and there's knowledge at the end, but apparently there is no case where there's no yediyah betchila, because everybody knows that. Even the school children know. Mi'ika de les le yediyas beis rabu, is there somebody that doesn't have at least the knowledge of a school child? How are you going to have a case where there's ein bo yediyah betchila at all, according to this answer? And the Gemara says, no, there is a case. Amar le said to him, yes, you could have a case. Mashkachas le, you can find the scenario as follows. Betinok shenishba levein hanochrim. Let's say you have a child that is captured among the non-Jews. He just never learned these halachas. That can be a situation where there's no yediyah b'tchila. And the Gemara continues at the two dots. The Mishnah said, Yitzios Shabbos Shtayim Shein Arba. Again, there are two scenarios, which are actually four scenarios when it comes to transferring from one Rishus to another on Shabbos. And the idea over here is that you can have a situation, again, where the Ani comes to the house of the Balabayas. The Ani is in Rishus Harabim, and the Balabayas is in the Rishus HaYachid. So you can have two scenarios where the item is going out to the Rishus Harabim. That's where the Ani brings it out to the Rishus Harabim, or it's the Balabayas that's placing it in the Rishus Harabim. And then you can have two cases in the other direction, where the Ani is bringing it into the Rishus HaYachid, or again, it's the Balabayas that's bringing it into the Rishus HaYachid, so you can have a total of four scenarios. And the Gemara says, Tanan Hasam, we learned in the Mishnah over there, this is a Mishnah Mesechet Shabbos, Yitzias Shabbos Shtayim Shein Arba Bifnim, that when it comes to the transfer from one Rishus to another on Shabbos, it's two which is four inside, Ushtayim Shein Arba B'chutz, and then you have two which is four outside. Now that would be actually a total of 8. Now the Mishnah in Shabbos, what that's referring to is that you can have scenarios where there is chiyuv, where there's liability, and scenarios where there's exemption. What that means is that in order to be liable, one person has to do the akira and the hanacha. For example, the balabayas, he does the akira, he uproots it from the Rishus HaYachid, and then he places it, the hanacha, he places it in Rishus Harabim. Let's say he would do the akira, he would lift it up from the Rishus HaYachid, but then it would actually be the Ani who would do the hanacha in Rishus Harabim, so one would do the akira, one would do the hanacha, so that would be a case where the person is potter. So what it means in Mesechet Shabbos is Shtayim Shein Arba Bifnim. You have two cases inside which are going to be chayiv, but there's two cases inside which will be potter, because again the akira and the hanacha were done by different people. And the same thing is bachutz. When it comes to outside, you're going to have two scenarios which are chayiv and two which are potter. So it's phrased and it's viewed a little bit differently in that Mishnah Mesechet Shabbos. And so the Gemara says, What's the difference that over here in our Mishnah, it just says 2 which is 4. We just have a total of 4 cases. And again, they're all cases of liability. What's the difference that over there in Mesechet Shabbos, we talk about 2 which are 4 inside and 2 which are 4 outside. So why do we do that? And the Gemara says, well, Hasam over there, the Iker Shabbos, where it's Mesechet Shabbos, we're dealing with the laws of Shabbos. So Tani Avos v'Toldos. So we talk about the Avos and the Toldos. The Gemara understands it to mean that over there we're discussing both Hotza'ah, that's the Av, that's going from Rishus HaYachid to Rishus Harabim, and the Tolda, which is going the other direction from Rishus Harabim to Rishus HaYachid. But over here, the Lavik or Shabbos, where it's not the main area where we're focusing on Shabbos, it's not Mesechet Shabbos. So Avos Tani v'Toldos lo Tani. So we talk about Avos, we talk about going from Rishus HaYachid to Rishus Harabim, but not Toldos, not the other direction. But the Gemara says, 1 second, that's not a good answer. Because avos ma'ininu, because again, what are avos? That's yitzios. That's when you're going out. That's when you're going from Rishus HaYachid to Rishus Harabim. But yitzios, tarti haven. But yitzios, you really only have 2. If we're talking about yitzios, what do we mean that there are 4 yitzios? There's only 2 scenarios of chiyuv when it comes to yitzia. If the ani takes it out, or if the balabayas takes it out, there's only going to be 2, not 4. And if you're going to say that in our Mishnah, we're listing 4 cases because you have 2 cases where the person is liable, that's if the ani does the akira and the hanacha, and if the balabayas does the akira and the hanacha, and then you'll have 2 cases where there's no liability. Let's say the ani does the akira and the balabayas does the hanacha, or vice versa. Those will be 2 cases of exemption. That can't be the explanation of our Mishnah. But our Mishnah has to be similar to maros negoyim. The case of tzara is also listed in our Mishnah. Just like over there, all scenarios were liability cases. So to whatever is being talked about in our Mishnah, the 4 cases all have to be cases of liability. And so therefore the Gemara says, Elamar Apapa, rather Apapa says, Hasam de Iker Shabbos, over there again where it's Mesechet Shabbos, the laws of Shabbos are what we're focusing on. So Tani Chiyuve Upiture, we learn again, like we said when we originally explained this, we're learning cases of liability and exemption over there. You're talking about in both directions. Hotzah, the 2 cases of liability and the 2 cases of exemption, and Hachnasa, the 2 cases of liability and the 2 cases of exemption. But over here, Chiyuve Tani Upiture Lo Tani, we're just giving you cases of liability, not cases of exemption. So we're just talking about the 2 cases of Hotzah that there's liability, and we're talking about the 2 cases of Hachnasa that there is liability. The Gemara says, Chiyuve Ma'ininu, again, what's the liability? That's Yitzios. So then we're talking about a situation of Yitzios when you're going out to Rishus Harabim, but Yitzios Tarti Hu Dehavin, that's only 2. What do you mean there are 4? And again, as we just said, the Gemara says, no, shtayim da hotza, ushtayim da achnasa. There's two exiting, there's two going from Rosh Hashanah to Rosh Hashanah, and there's two cases of liability going from Rosh Hashanah to Rosh Hashanah, again, depending on whether it's the Balabayas or the Ani who's doing both the Akira and the Hanacha. But the Gemara says still, V'hayitzios katani, but the language of the Mishnah is actually Yitzios. That sounds like you're only going in one direction from Rosh Hashanah to Rosh Hashanah. How can you say that the four cases of our Mishnah include Hachnasa? And the Gemara says to that, Amar Ravashi says, Tana Hachnasa Nami Hotza Karila. Our Tana refers to Hachnasa as Hotza. You can call Hachnasa with the word Hotza, even though Hotza literally means you're taking out, which would mean Rosh Hashanah to Rosh Hashanah, but it really goes both directions. Even Hachnasa can be referred to as Hotza. The Gemara says, Mimai, from where do we know this? How do we know this? And we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Hey Amud Beis.